Welcome to the Sage Intacct product tour. Today we're going to look at why Sage Intacct has made big differences to the financial health of growing companies. We're going to do this by diving into the product and looking at a few of the ways Sage Intacct brings visibility and productivity to the finance team. We aren't going to look into every area of the product today, but rather stick to those things that are of general interest to most companies. If you're dealing with specialty areas like subscription contracts, project accounting, or inventory management, those are parts of other specialised product tours. Today we're going to look at the order-to-cash process and the automation around getting revenue into your company. We'll also look at procure-to-pay, which involves controlling spending and automation around approvals. Then we'll dive into Sage Intacct's built-in tools to provide visibility. And lastly, we'll wrap up with a closer look at managing multiple locations or entities. Before we dive into the system demo, I'd like to set the stage a little with why we are looking at these particular areas. As a growing company, you face challenges in finance. Many of these challenges can actually become a bottleneck to a growing company. Are you seeing a growing number of transactions in both revenue and expenses? Are those transactions occurring at more locations where information is slow to make it back to the main office? And are you finding the close and subsequent visibility taking longer and longer? Throwing more people at the problem has its own challenges and often leads to less control over financials. We should be celebrating growth, but often the finance team is stuck cleaning up a lot of mess created by growth. The simple task of responding to customers about sales orders becomes a monumental task of sifting through data. This can lead to a drop in customer satisfaction, adversely affecting growth. When every location is making purchases on their own, you lack the controls necessary to capitalize on the new scale of your existing company. No one is holding suppliers accountable, picking the best suppliers, or capturing the benefits of volume purchasing. And approvals, where they exist, become a manually intensive game of find the manager. The reporting spreadsheets that worked so well when you were small become cumbersome and error-prone. Closing the books and using spreadsheets to produce end-of-period reports can take so many days or weeks that the reports are out of date as soon as they complete. All of this leads to questionable decisions being made on old, questionable information. Continued growth in a competitive environment requires a more nimble approach to finance. In today's demo, we are going to dive into examples of that more nimble approach, made possible through the power of cloud computing. An ideal solution would include a sales order system that is both automated in terms of workflow and quickly accessible to answer questions about orders in real time. In purchasing, automated workflows make the process completely transparent with automated approvals as a part of every purchase. Reporting should be built in and configurable by the accounting team without the help of IT. It should capture real-time metrics that help the company see where they are going each day. An appropriate report should be available for review by any stakeholder without having to request information from the finance team. And from a single login, finance leaders should be able to see financials across all of their locations or entities, both individually and consolidated, and they should be able to see this consolidated view at any time, not just at the end of the reporting period. Let's go ahead and get started by diving into our first area of the product, order to cash. What we're going to look at right here is a dashboard, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. What we want to do now is go over to order entry. Across the top here we have our different applications within the system. I'm going to go ahead and choose order entry. This brings us to our order entry overview. Here we can access our different data tables like customers, warehouses, product lines, etc. We can also get to this workflow in your tasks, and this is where we are going to spend some time. We need to create a sales quote, create a sales order, fulfill an order, create a sales invoice, and we can create one of these and then progress it forward along this workflow without re-entering data. I can start at any point here. I can start with a sales quote, I can start with a sales order, and then move that forward. If for some reason I need to, I can go ahead and start by creating a sales invoice as well. I've gone ahead today and I've created a sales quote. I'm going to jump over here to the left where we have a pop-out menu with all of our different transactions. So instead of clicking on the plus or this button here, I will just click on the name of the option I want to get to, and I get to a list of ones that are already built. So if I click on sales quote, I get to this sales quote list, and I've already started this sales quote here for JIT Chemical Corp, and it's in draft mode. I'm going to go ahead and finish that up by opening it to edit. You can see across the top I have everything about this. I have the transaction date, the due date, item total, all of the information that goes into this. I can see the status is draft, which means that it's not ready to be moved forward in the workflow at all. I simply created a draft of this and the system is holding it for me to finish up. When I enter the customer here to start this, it automatically filled in the information for the quote to and ship to. The payment terms were put in automatically, but I can change those. I added a reference number, the customer's PO number they were working from, and I can go ahead and add attachments as well. If I had an image or a PDF of that purchase order, I could add that to the attachments, or I might want some other document that goes along with this sales quote. Down here I have my line items. Right now I have two line items. I have the Defender Pro, one of those, and I have these add-ons. You can't see the full line here, but it's the motion detectors. So I have 8 motion sensors to go with the security system. I'm going to go ahead and add another line item here, and that's for 4 of these cameras. So we'll go ahead and add them in. And I want to show you something interesting. I've got some information here that we'd expect on a line item. We've got quantity, unit price, extended price, and as I click out of that, the extended price will update automatically. So I've got 4 units accounted for, but then I've got this drop down menu on each line and it shows additional information. We can extend the description. I can write a memo about the price calculation. Price calculations may be out of the ordinary, and if this was some kind of contract or subscription, I could put in a start and end date. And then this part down here, this is actually where we're going to change something or add something in the dimensions. We've got location, department, project, customer, vendor, class, and we've also got a user-defined dimension which can be named anything you want. This is just to show you that you can add these different dimensions. So what these dimensions do is they take the transaction and we're going to go ahead and set the location. We're going to say that this one's in Texas, and remember we're going to get back to multi-entity or multi-location later on in this presentation. But for now, let's just go ahead and tag this to show that this order is going through the Texas location. Now I'm going to close this and hide those details, and I've already set them on the other 2 lines. Now let's go ahead and post this. Now with that posted, it's brought us back to the same page, the list we looked at, but there's a new link here. It's called Convert. From this point, I can also do this from the transaction screen itself once it's posted if I want to go back to it and look at it. But right here I can click Convert and I can see that I can convert this to a sales order. I could also convert it to another sales quote, maybe to edit it or to change something if I'm creating multiple quotes with different options for a client or something. But I'm going to go ahead and create a sales order so we can progress this. I'm going to click Sales Order. Now we've converted this transaction, all of the information has come forward, all of those line items. I don't have to reset anything. It's come forward to the sales order and it can be moved forward in the process. I've still got my transaction dates, all of my information up here, and at this point it's in edit mode, and I can go ahead and make changes here. I can add a message. Again, I can add another attachment if I've got some kind of new confirmation document based on the quote. Maybe at this point I've got the purchase order and I can add that into the attachments. I'm going to go ahead and post this. Which brings me to my sales order list, and again on this sales order I have convert. I can go ahead and make a shipper for this and send that shipper out, post that, and that will go into the operations process to get this shipped out and go out with it. And now I have my list of shippers, and assuming that has been processed and I want to invoice the customer now, I can convert one last time to a sales invoice. So I've just progressed this all the way through my workflow, and I now have a sales invoice. Now the difference between the first 3 transactions that we looked at and this sales invoice is that the sales invoice is now going to hit the GL. When I post this, it's going to create all of the debits and credits I need in the GL to actually be accounting for this transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and post this, and we're going to look at some other things about these order entry transactions. So now I have this posted in my sales invoices. I'm going to go back and have a look at another one. Let's say a customer calls in. We've got this customer that we sell to, Texas Alarm Companies, and they want to know about an order. An order that they placed, they think they received it, they want to know some information about it. So we can go in here and in the customer column we just type Texas. We don't need the whole name, and it's going to shorten the list for me down to 1. That's great. I have 1 invoice for Texas Alarm Company. I can view this. I'm going to click View next to this. I can bring up this sales invoice and I can see everything about it. I can see the transaction date, the due date, the totals, the subtotals. I can see that the transaction status is closed and that it was paid. So I have all of this header information right away. These are some big questions they asked straight away. And I can see what item it was for, the quantity, the price and the total. I can also go into a history and I can look at this history and I can see that this started out as a sales order. It didn't start out as a quote, it was a sales order. Then it went to a shipper and then went to a sales invoice. By clicking on this, I can bring up any one of these in a little window and look at any details. I can go back and see if the order differed from the shipper or from the invoice or if anything changed along the way. I can also see who created it, so I can go back and maybe delve in to see that if I need to. I can also see the payment details. I can see when it was paid and how much was paid. I even have this payment record that I could go and view. The payment record inside this system. Let's see where it was received and what bank it went to inside my own system. So I have a lot of information to get to right at my fingertips to serve that customer. So I'm not diving into paperwork looking at orders. I can do it right on the fly and quickly get that customer the things they need about the order and get that information out to them. That's pretty much all I want to share right now about order entry. I'm going to go ahead and move back to the dashboard we were at to start with, my CFO's daily view. Now let's jump back to our presentation. Now that we've taken a look at order to cash, let's jump over to purchase to pay. As you might expect, purchasing follows similar workflows to what I've shown you in order entry. It also has some unique aspects that help you maintain spending control across your organisation. If we go back into our product demo, we can see that we are now back here at our dashboard. We now want to focus on the purchasing application. So let's jump over to the purchasing overview. You can see on this purchasing overview that it's the other side of the coin from order entry. We've got our suppliers, warehouses and product lines and items and price lists that we can work with. We also have this workflow, very similar to the workflow we had in order entry, only this time we are dealing with purchasing. We can create a purchase requisition, we can create a purchase order, receive a shipment, create a supplier invoice. This is a very similar type of workflow, so I'm not going to dive so much into the workflow because it really matches what we've just seen on order entry. You're just doing it on the purchasing side. What I want to look at are some of the controls around purchasing and some of the power you have inside of Sage Intacct to make purchasing work for your organisation. So I've gone ahead and logged in. I'm moving to another tab here as another user, as Drew Jackson. And Drew Jackson, you will notice on his menu here, doesn't have nearly the number of applications I had under my own login because he's not an administrator in the system. He's an employee user and he only has limited access to things. He can enter time and expenses, he can do a few things for the company, he can look at dashboards that we allow him to look at, he can look at reports that he has access to. and he can look at purchasing. When we go over to the purchasing overview for Drew, we can see a lot of things are greyed out. Drew doesn't have the ability to create purchase orders or shipments, or create supplier invoices, but he can create purchase requisitions. So I'm going to create a purchase requisition as Drew. And I'm going to pick a supplier here. Let's say we need to order a few things from Staples. And here we could enter a supplier document number if we had something we needed to put in, but he doesn't have any of this information. It's just a request to purchase. We need to buy some paper. $50 cases of paper, and we want to buy 10 printer cartridges. We're really trying to drive up the amount to make sure we are covered so that we can see how the approval process works. Now that Drew's created this, he can go ahead and submit it. Okay, it's asking us for a location. Do you remember on the order entry we went and put in a location for this? So location's locked into our system as something that is required on transactions. This makes sure that everyone puts in locations for the different transactions they're creating. We need to go and make sure we've put a location on these transactions. We're going to go ahead and say that Drew is going to order these for the locations that he can see. I think he can see Texas. Yeah, that's right, he can see Texas and Maine. So we've also limited him to different locations that he can work with. We'll set Texas there, we'll go to the next row and we'll go ahead and set Texas as the location and we'll close that. The system is not going to let these transactions go through without the right tag on them for the dimensions that we want to track. As I submit this, it brings us back to our main workflow here. This is mainly because he doesn't have anything else to do with this. It's gone out and it's going to require approval for that amount of money. Jumping back to my login, I'm here in the purchasing application. Now if I'm actively working in purchasing, I can go down to this little approve purchasing transactions button, and here I can see that I have this. Drew Jackson has submitted this purchase acquisition to Staples for $2,900 and I can approve or decline from here. This is not the only place I can approve or decline. If I'm the main approver for these, or if I'm his manager, I've received an email about this approval, so I can see that in my email. I can also open up Sage Intacct on a portable mobile device, on my phone or tablet, and I can do approvals from there remotely. So I can see all the things that need to be approved on Approvals dashboard on a mobile device, and I can also go to a main dashboard. So if I go back to dashboards and I open up this particular dashboard here, the purchasing operations dashboard that I've created, I can see that I have this approvals component in the upper right. And I have the same transaction here from Drew that I can look at, and if I scroll to the right I can see what date it was, and I have some things that need to be handled. I have lots of ways that I can go through and approve this. Jumping back to purchasing, when I approve, I can put on comments. I can put in whatever I need to. I can approve this. Maybe I put in some conditional comments and that's gone through and been approved. Something else I could do is go back to these purchase requisitions now. I want to look at my purchasing requisitions, and let's say I want to convert this to a PO. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to a purchase order. And I can actually have a conversation about this as well. And then I can go ahead and post this. And any document I want to view, I can view this purchase order and I can say something like, how often do we reorder? Maybe because I'm trying to control costs, I want to know if this is a monthly, quarterly or annual cost. How often do we reorder this? And I can share that comment. I can even set it to talk to Drew Jackson, and I can go ahead and share that. And now this is permanently stored here, and I can see it in my Feed Collaboration Center. I can see that I've got this piece here and I'm talking to Drew Jackson. I put in his login. I think we could actually use his full name and it would work better. I can go ahead and edit this if I find that I used the wrong name here. And there we see that he's popped up here and I can add that in. It keeps track of who I'm looking for. And so now that's going to show up on Drew Jackson's feed when he goes to his collaboration feed. He'll actually get a notification that someone mentioned him in a feed, and he can see this in his feed as well. The other aspect beyond the approvals I wanted to point out in purchasing, if we go back to our purchasing overview, is that we have the ability to track this idea of received shipment. So rather than just a purchase order going out when it's received, the people in our receiving, in our warehouse or wherever we are receiving, can check it against the received shipment order and make sure it's right, and they can process it forward before we process the supplier invoice. This way we can keep track of all of our suppliers, whether we're getting things processed on time. So if I look at receive a shipment, or if something came in, they can document what was in that, or I can look at an existing purchase order. And if I take this purchase order and convert it to a PO receipt, then the people in the warehouse can look at this and say, did we get 50 cases? Did we get 10 toner cartridges? And if they didn't, they can change these amounts. Maybe something was on back order and we only received 9 of these. They can go ahead and post that. So now we have it posted. It's a different transactional amount than the PO, and if we have a different amount, we are keeping check of what we are actually receiving. So we're adding controls, and we can look back and see which suppliers. We can get report on suppliers and see how they're doing and whether they're a good supplier or whether they're consistently having to change from the PO. And so we have some better supplier management here. The other thing we have, because we're doing this accounting at the top level, is we can share suppliers across all of these different organisations. We can start getting to economies of scale, so people working in Texas, Maine, California, Florida can work from a common set of suppliers and go back to those suppliers and get discount pricing based on the volume we're doing across all of our organisations. These are just some of the advantages we have in maintaining control on purchasing. We also have spend control you can set up. I'm not going to dive into that in this demo, but it basically says you set budgets and you can set warnings when a transaction is going to exceed that spend budget. That's another way we can control costs within the system and manage those costs and manage purchasing. I'm going to go ahead and jump back to my dashboards here. Now that we've taken a look at Procure to Pay, let's jump into immediate visibility. So I've been saying for a while that we're going to get to discussing these dashboards in a little more depth, and this is where we do it. This is really where reporting starts, in the dashboard. You have the opportunity within a dashboard to look at upfront metrics. We call them performance cards right here at the top. We also have the ability to filter by date. I can actually create more filters along here, and I can filter by dimensions. I'm going to show you another way to do that as well. When we get to multi-entity, we can look at different locations or entities, but in my dashboard configuration, and you can configure these dashboards yourself, there's lots of configurations you can do. You bring up menus to look at all the different aspects, and you can decide which filters you want to show on the dashboard. I have the as of date. I can easily put the location on there and save that. Now the dashboard is rebuilt, and it has a drop down for locations, so I can filter by a particular location. So I have this dashboard. I have dashboard grouping. These are role-based. I happen to be in my CFO Daily View dashboard. In this company, I have just a few dashboards. I've got the CFO dashboard. I have two of those, and I group them in a category so that I can use a little drop-down menu to move between the ones in that category. I have an employee dashboard, a purchasing indirect, and a purchasing operations dashboard. There's not a limit to how many dashboards you could create. So you could create one for purchasing, one for accounts receivable. You could create one for different levels of management and different parts of the company. Perhaps you deal with projects and you want a project dashboard. You could create one to look at metrics around the projects or metrics around subscriptions. Any of the things that make sense to you within your company and the things you want to see on a daily basis for a particular role, you can create a dashboard for. In this case, I've got this CFO Daily View, and I've got some main cards that we want to look at, and any of these cards I can click on. For instance, I could click on expenses. Notice how it turned blue. This meant that it was clickable. I can drill down into it and I can see what's driving the summary number that I've got up here, and I can see that these are the expenses. This is the month ending because I've got a comparison to prior month. I have the previous month and the current month, and I've got these compared here. I noticed that my expenses were a little higher here for some professional fees. I can go ahead and drill into that and see what's driving it. It looks like there was an expense adjustment by general ledger entry, so I can go ahead and close that. But I can drill down even further and get right to the transactions that make up these metrics. All of the performance cards are really behind the scenes as a group of accounts. We've taken all of our asset accounts and we've created an account group that we've pointed this performance card at and said, give us the summary for this month and show us the comparison to the prior month. These are configurable by your accounting team. You don't need to rely on IT to come in to create different dashboards for you. You can create these dashboards. And one of the great things about these dashboards is that they provide a point of login and a point of reference for other roles in the company. So as a finance team, you're not a single point of contact for getting reporting. You're delivering reporting on a real-time basis to the stakeholders and decision makers in the company. Here we have our cash flow in detail. This is a standard tabular report. We've got our numbers the way we expect to see every report. We can scroll through this and we can click on these different areas and see what's making up these accounts. Notice we've broken this up by entity. So again, we have that dimensional breakout of what's going on in the company. Over here we have net income by location, and we've put this into a donut chart. So we can kind of see where our big income is coming from. This tells us a story right here with the visual, that California is a pretty big player in the income for our company, as is Texas. We can click on any of these and there's a visual jump out here, but it also gives us a drill down of what's going into that net income number. Then we can drill down on those numbers as well to see the transactions behind the summary information. At any point, if we want to just look at the numbers, we can click Show Data and it gives us the numbers that are driving this simple chart, and then we can go back to Show Graph. This is an interesting metric. This is revenue per retail hour by location. So what we're doing here is we're taking something that is not a financial metric, retail hour, and we're comparing it against a financial metric, revenue, to generate this chart and to generate some data. This is a way that we can compare our different stores based on how much revenue per retail hour they're getting. Who's the most efficient in sales in these stores? And you can take this with just about any metric. You could do revenue per square meter, you could do revenue per employee or expenses per employee in a company and see how that metric's moving up and down. In the non-profit space, frequently we get a lot of metrics around volunteer hours and efficiency with funds. So you can use these metrics, retail hour in this case, as something we are collecting or capturing on what we call a statistical account, which is an operational metric that gets added in each month. And a lot of these metrics flow in through other systems. Maybe you have something that keeps track of hours at your different locations and that can use Intacct's open API to post those hours into a statistical account in the financial system to drive the metric. This gives us a lot of opportunity within our reporting to look at not just the financials, but also the operational efficiency within the company. Another thing we have on dashboards is this collaboration feed. So this is the same piece that we looked at in the last set, the purchase order that had a comment on it. This is showing up in our collaboration feed. I can go ahead and look at this here. It is a permanent record of what was asked, and I can keep this up on my CFO dashboard and see the conversations that are going on in the company. I can set it to things that I follow. I can set it to just things that are related to pieces I wrote or where someone pointed to me in a comment. I have a lot of control over this, and the feed can be up on my dashboard, and I can make this my login point into the company. We can create balance sheet by entity again, breaking out different types of metrics that we can have standard reports against for different entities on these dimensions. I'm going to jump over really quickly to another dashboard. This is my purchasing operations. Here we see some interesting reports. We've got budgets that we've set up, and we can have indirect spend, actual versus budget. We have set up different analysis on spending. We've got our purchasing analysis, we've got purchasing of a particular product. The Defender is one of our products, and we want to look at what the purchasing history is for this product. We can look at our receipt history, our supplier aging. You can put a number of reports in here. You can also go out and look at the reports. Notice that some of these slide over quite a bit where they're much larger. I can go ahead and click on View All, and it asks me how I want to look at it. And we'll say, OK, look at it in a printable format, and it will go ahead and give me a printable format of that. I can also look at it in an online format, force it to open in Acrobat as a PDF to export, and share it. If I want to make it drillable, go to the HTML format, and now I can drill down on any of these transactions, and I can look at the transaction related to the amount of this purchase. In addition to this, we have a report center. When I go out to my report center, it's just another application tab. I get all of my reports. And if I open up my board here, I can see that I've got the ability to go in and break out my dimensions. This is where I can control my dimension groups and my dimension structures. So beyond having dimensions that we can tag things with, like each location for example, I can also create groups of dimensions. So I've created a dimension around some metrics in my company that I want to keep track of. Maybe I have this metric of employee, and I put it into groups of different types of employees. I can look at metrics according to these different types of employees, or I can set it by location or territory. In this case, we have a dimension structure. Maybe you work in real estate and you want to keep track of local authorities. You could create a dimension for local authority, and then you could create groups of dimensions for those different types of local authorities that you're dealing with. You can create multiple levels of reporting that break down your information according to your dimensions and your groups of dimensions. I can click on any of these balance sheets. This is the balance sheet by entity over time. I'm just going to do all of my locations and departments. This is going to open up. I can expand this to the full area of the screen, and I can look at and drill down into this report into any of these areas. I can tell it to print. I can export it to Excel if I need this information in another format, or if I want to manipulate it in some way or combine it with some other operational reporting that I'm doing. The other thing I can do with any of these is I can take this report and edit it. And one of the great strengths of reporting within Sage Intacct is that I don't have to go to IT to script out something from my reports. As a finance person, I can go in and I can make adjustments to my reports myself. Maybe I like this report. I may want to duplicate this report and then start working on the duplicate. So I would duplicate it, rename it, and then start changing the report to do something else, so I don't have to start from scratch creating a new report from nothing. I can go ahead and make changes to the rows. I can rearrange the rows. I can decide the detail, whether it's summary or detail, what the basis is. In this case it's a default from a group. The basis for the amounts, whether I want to always display it, or if I want it to be hidden, and I can expand it when the report is being viewed. I can look at my different columns. I can create columns in my report and I decide what they do. These expand as I go to work on different columns. and I can define if they're looking at a particular period. I can define if it's going to be a calculated value, and I can set calculations on certain columns. I define that in my computations. I can click computations on these different columns. I can create filters. I can define which ones get included, which ones get prompted. Notice I had these two prompts for department and location at the beginning. That came up because I had these two prompts checked, so the user, at what we call runtime, basically at the time the report is going to run, gets a prompt to make decisions about the filters that are going to be used in the report. I can even set an as of date. Maybe I want a consistent report. I create a copy of a report and want that to just run. That was my end of year report. That's where I want it to stop. I give it an as of date. As of the 31st of the 12th, 2017, that's it. And that's where I want that report to statically stay, and I could label it that way. I can generate different formats, and permissions are really important. I can set who gets to look at this report. Some reports might be more sensitive than others, and you can set the report to be available to everyone, or you can set it to be hidden from everyone and only give access to a few people. You get to decide who is on the list, who gets to see reports, and it's not a matter of being greyed out. They just won't see it, even if it is in their list of reports. There is a lot of versatility here. I'm not going to go into everything. We have some classes actually on how to use the financial reports and really get the most out of them, but it's a huge part of the visibility into Sage Intacct. I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm not going to change this report at this time. You can also do the same thing with charts. So these are my main financial reports, but I also have reports on the general ledger and under each of the applications, purchasing, order entry, and so on. And I can do the same with these reports. I can go in, make changes to them, edit them as needed. Some reports are standard. There's certain standard reports, and we can lock those down so you have them and they're always working the right way. I can also memorize reports. I can go into any of these reports and I can say, save this report with these settings. These are the filters I want. Memorize it and save it to my memorized list. Then I can take those memorized reports and I can schedule them. I can go ahead and set schedules to have them delivered. So maybe I have a month-end scheduled report. I have these 5 reports that get delivered to somebody at the end of the month, and they have all the memorized info, and they are just for the current month or end of quarter, however you want to set them up. You can also set your favorite reports. I can go to any of these reports here and I can take this report and just click the star. It's now a favorite. When I go over to my favorites, I have that report there. I can do the same thing with dashboards. I can go to any of my dashboards on this list. I can take a report like this and say, I want that to be a favourite, and I want that one to be favourite, and now my favourites list has both of these dashboards on it. So you've got quick access to the things that you use the most. It makes it quick and easy for you. Let's now jump back over to our presentation and see where we are in this demo. This brings us to our last section, multi-entity management. A big part of growth for many companies involves dealing with multiple entities. We've already seen several references in the demo to multi-entity functionality. Let me show you more precisely how Sage Intacct helps you manage financials for multiple entities from a single login. So as we look at multi-entity, I've gone to this drop down before and you can see that we have got access as an administrator, what's called a super user. I have access to all the entities. I can go into any one of these entities and do accounting in that entity, and it will be just for that entity. So for instance, I'm going to jump over here to Texas. Notice it opens a new tab in the browser. The old tab is still open with the top level. From here I can see that I've got the same CFO dashboard with daily view, but the numbers are different because it's only reflecting the financials for Texas. Notice its net income by location just reflects Texas. Same with this retail hour by location, it's only showing Texas. So I have got these different metrics, and in this case it's breaking down into 2 locations of Dallas and Austin and showing me the metrics there. I can do accounting in this as if I was only in the Texas environment. I could do my purchasing and my orders from here. In this case, if we go into order entry and we create an order, when I go and choose an item and I go down here, it's already put in the location. Remember when we had to add the locations when we were working from the top level? Because we're in the Texas entity, the location is added automatically to our order. So let me just cancel out of this. I just want to point out some things that are being done automatically for you in these different orders. Notice we still have the same list of customers. As you saw when I did the drop down from order entry, we still have our same group of customers available, as these are managed at the top level. The other thing we've got is what's going on here with the four entities. We have this continual consolidation going on, meaning that if I do transactions in Texas or California and I enter these transactions and they hit the general ledger, that's going to roll up to my reporting at this top level. So when I come back to this top level, I'm going to see that reflected in my revenue and assets and income and expenses. I'm going to see those things happening here because they're using a shared chart of accounts across these companies. In instances where you can't have a shared chart of accounts, perhaps you're doing business in a foreign country and that country's government requires you to have a certain setup of accounts, or maybe you've merged a couple of companies and those companies have very different types of businesses and you don't want to go through the trouble of creating a shared chart of accounts, you can have different charts of accounts and you can map those to a top level chart of accounts. With that top level you can do what's called global consolidations, and that allows you to just consolidate any of those entities at any time. It's just a couple of clicks. Some companies have even automated using Intacct's open API. We have an API call for running a global consolidation across your organization. This is just a little bit of the controls we have, a little bit of the way we get into these different entities. I mentioned this earlier and I want to point it out again. When I go over here to Drew Jackson's login and we look at his limited access, we can see that he also has limited access in terms of entities. So you can set users to only work in certain entities. You can set a worker to just work in the Texas entity or just the California entity, and they won't be able to work in any other entities. When they log in, it's just as if they are logging into a single entity company. But at the top level you have access to all of the entities and you can move between them and do accounting in those different entities. I also want to mention that you can nest them. Here we have locations within these, but those are actually locations and not entities. We actually just have 4 entities, but you can nest entities within one another. So you can create a group of European entities and then you maybe have an entity in Germany, an entity in France and an entity in Switzerland, and you can group those different entities and then you can do roll-ups within the groups as well as for the entire organization. That's the end of our demo portion. I'm going to jump back to our presentation now. So why choose Sage Intacct? We're the right partner to help in your success. We're a leader in innovation. We're recognized as a visionary by industry analysts like Gartner. We're the cloud accounting leader in customer satisfaction with a rating of 98 out of 100 on G2 Crowd across over 2,000 reviews. We are the first and only preferred financial solution of the AICPA, and we're the preferred choice of the IFAC. As you grow, you're going to find that other partners are a best fit for other aspects of your organization, like CRM, payroll and planning. As a best-in-class solution, Sage Intacct integrates nicely with dozens of these solutions. You have the flexibility to choose integrated solutions that make the most sense for your business. You can swap out those systems as you grow and change. We really do want to be your partner for the life of your business. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you saw some things that align with where your finance team is going. We would love to hear from you and even show you a personalized demonstration of how Sage Intacct can meet your specific needs.